Coming up on Theatre Talk.
I feel I've transmogrified into Helen Mirren.
Yes.
Whereas I was
Helen
Mirren. Now I'm like Helen Mirren, and I'm not quite sure who that sort of thing is.
Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
At least you had the benefit of a formal education. You know I wasn't that lucky.
You were at home with a tutor?
Yes, that's right, yes.
I'm curious, was that because you were female?
Oh, you're ahead of me, Prime Minister. I was banking on the fact that I still am.
From New York City, this is Theatre Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post. Now, Susan, I have been an enormous fan of Helen Mirren since I saw a wonderful movie called The Long Good Friday.
Oh, that's a
with
great
Bob
movie.
Hoskins.
Yes.
And I must confess to having developed a little crush back then, which has just gotten...
Sue, we'll quickly disabuse you of that.
Thank you very much. That crush has just gotten bigger than everything I have seen her do. I thought she was wonderful in Dance of Death. Several years ago now, she was on Broadway. And Helen is back on Broadway giving a terrific performance in The Audience, Peter Morgan's play about Queen Elizabeth II and her relationship with all the prime ministers who have served under her reign. Welcome back to Theatre Talk, Helen.
Thank you very much.
Of course, you're well known for playing Queen Elizabeth in the movie, The Queen, written by Peter Morgan. And I think I've heard you say before when Peter called you, he said, guess what, I've got this play. You were like, no, please.
It was an email, actually. I emailed back a two-word email, you bastard. Because I kind of knew. Anyway, here we are. And here I am on Broadway, and I'm very happy to be here. And it's great to be here, and I'm loving every minute. But I was slightly dragged, screaming and kicking to this one.
Back into it, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it's been a while since you've been on Broadway, though, New York. I think it's been since Dance
of
Death. Yes,
since Dance of Death.
And
yes,
what kept you away? I mean, I would...
Well, you know, other things. It's you know, theatre, as you know, takes up quite a big chunk of your life. You know, you have to give away at least 6 months of your life to doing any one play. And, you know, that's quite a big chunk. And I did do plays, but they happened to be at the National Theatre in London instead of in here. I would have loved to have brought, we were talking about Morning Becomes Electra.
Yes, which show?
A show I did in that era, in that time, at the National Theatre. And I very much wanted to bring that to New York. But, you know, it's a 4 3/4 hour long play.
Yes, that's hard to pull off.
It's hard. I wanted to do it as 3 plays, because he actually wrote it as 3 plays.
Yes, right.
And I wanted to do it as 3 plays on 3 different nights. And then that would really encourage, and maybe sell the tickets, you know, have a sort of bargain price if you came to see all 3.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad. I mean, but Helen Mirren in just about anything now we know is going to sell pretty well.
Well,
so I would
not
imagine you'd
necessarily.
have
I mean, I think the material always has to be good. It all starts with the play and the material. Yes, there are certain sort of big stars who can just... It's what Arthur Miller used to call the theatre of public appearance, which is basically... You know, it doesn't matter what the material is. If it's got a pop star in it, or you know, then it'll be packed. And the minute they're out of it, the audience will be gone.
Yeah, we used to call them star vehicles.
Yes, yes, but it's more than that. It's as Mr. Miller said, you know, the theatre of public appearance is just to see this incredibly famous person in real life. And the fact they're on the stage and saying words really is irrelevant.
Well, what I like about the audience, though, is you could sort of say on paper, oh, well, Helen Mirren playing Queen Elizabeth, it's a star vehicle. But yet it's such a warm play about a side of a woman that we never see. I mean, she's a symbol, of course, but in this play, Peter and you make her a human being, and I would imagine that that's kind of the reason to be involved in it.
Yes, it is. I mean, you know, she is a human being.
Right.
And she is a human being who's lived a totally alien and strange life that none of us can possibly grasp or understand. But she is, underneath all that, the same as you and I, you know.
I read an interview you did with John Halpern,
yes.
Vanity Fair, and you made the point that Queen Elizabeth had never drawn her own bath. And I find
Probably not.
Well,
no.
I find that such a fascinating thing to ponder of what is an existence where you don't draw your own bath.
It's impossible to comprehend, isn't
Comprehend,
it?
yes.
Someone who's never stood in line, ever.
Right.
Ever. Maybe when she was in the Second World War, when she joined up the Women's Auxiliary, and she did train to become a car mechanic. I suspect that was the happiest she's ever
And
been.
perhaps she drew a bath or two at the time.
And maybe then she did, but...
Or at least change the oil.
Yeah, well, I certainly changed the oil, absolutely. But, you know, it's a world we can't possibly imagine. And the wealthiest person in the world doesn't live in that world. In order to research for the film, I didn't really look at the Queen after she'd become Queen. I looked at all the material that I could find of her before she became Queen, and in fact, even before she knew she was going to become Queen. In other words, when she was sort of under 11 or 12, to see who that person was, who that real character was, underneath all of these layers of all of this stuff that's on top of her.
And you have these two wonderful young actresses playing Queen
Yes,
Elizabeth in the
yes.
audience. And
Both Americans, both Americans.
Yes,
Oh,
I know.
they are great.
They're
Adorable.
fantastic.
And then you go through this incredible transformation that there you are, and suddenly you're this young girl, very believable.
Yes, 27-year-old. Luckily, I don't have to play 15. That would be a bit of a stretch. That's a wonderful thing about theatre, isn't it? That this suspension of disbelief, as they say. I guess the same thing happens in the cinema, but you know, you can sort of do things in the theatre, and as long as you do them with elegance and authenticity, the audience will go along with you.
Sort of a technical question, but when you become younger, is there something that you do physically with yourself?
Yes, I stand up straighter, although she's always straight, but I try and really stand up straight. I change my voice. All of our voices have changed, but the Queen's voice in particular has changed quite a lot. She had a terribly, incredibly a sort of posh accent when she was very young. She really talked like that. You know, it's incredible when you listen to it.
Yeah.
It's really extreme. So I bring some of that into the voice. And then and all through the play, but especially when she's young, you know, I always remember she's a country woman, and she walks like a country woman. She walks like a horse woman. She almost walks like a cowboy, actually. You know, she sort of walks like this, you know. So I try to bring that physicality in.
And I love the relationship between the Queen in this interpretation and Harold Wilson.
Yes, yes, and much of what's in the play is true. He was her favourite, and she did invite him to, well, ask him to invite her to dinner at Downing Street, and the only other person who'd ever had that asked of them was Churchill.
And will you describe him?
You know, he's a Labour Prime Minister.
Yes.
He's left-wing. He's sort of quite left-wing. He was an important Prime Minister in British history, that sort of very awkward 60s era. And he was good in some ways, he was bad in other ways. But he was very much, and his whole thing, and which is also true, we have in the play, but he would always have this pipe, and he was always filling his pipe and puffing on it, and, you know, being very sort of homely. Can you say that in America? Homely is ugly.
Homely is ugly, yeah.
Yes,
Sort
it's
of
not
word.
in England. It's kind of...
Homey.
Homey. Homey, yes.
Very homey,
Right,
yes.
right.
Homey, I thought, were gangs, aren't they, homies?
Those are your pals from the neighborhood. Yes.
I'm confused.
But why was she comfortable? Why was she more comfortable
I
with
think
him
because
than
he
the
was
others?
funny.
Yeah.
And it is true. And you see her, she's very comfortable with working class people. She's comfortable with very working class people or very, very posh people. But all of us in between, you know, because we all get paralysed with what I call queenitis. You can see her eyes glaze over. She doesn't want to cope with our neurosis about our relationship with the Queen, but the very working class people don't have that. It's the Queen. They love her. They think she's fantastic, and she's theirs.
Do you suppose she was surrounded by working class people as a girl? You know, her nurses and such that she.
Well,
that she was
certainly her nannies, as we say in the play, were
Yeah.
good, you know, Scottish, you know, nannies. And there was in that era, there was very much a feeling that young royals, or, you know, should not be spoilt. they had to, you know, poor Prince Charles was sent to Gordonston,
Right.
which was a brutal school
Right.
for a sensitive boy like he, and I think he was always a sensitive person.
And you make the point that she as a woman could not be sent away to school.
No,
No.
she would not have been, no.
Even though they tried
Yes.
to. So what did you think of Harold Wilson when you were a young woman and he was in power?
I can't remember. I was just sort of getting on with my life as a young actress and really honestly not paying much attention. In retrospect, I think some terrible things were visually done to Britain at that time. You know, a lot of beautiful old buildings were ripped down.
They were knocked down for all
knocked
this.
down and terrible, crappy. But you know, it was still post-war Britain. You're only talking really about 20 years after the incredible devastation of the Second World War, and certainly, you know, when I got to London, and in fact, you mentioned earlier on the Long Good Friday. It's very interesting seeing the Long Good Friday now and seeing what London
it looks
has
like now,
become
yes.
since.
Yes.
Because that, when we're driving, not driving, what do you call it, in a boat? Floating, not floating.
Sailing,
not
Yeah,
sailing.
yacht there, the-
Yachting, not
Yeah,
yachting.
yeah, yeah.
Motoring down the
Boating,
Thames.
right.
Right.
And pointing out, well, Harold's pointing out, I want to develop all this. That was all, you know, Second World War Blitz destruction, and it was still there in the 60s. So there was a lot of stuff to be overcome, and Harold Wilson, you know, was a part of that.
You were a bit young for this, but did you catch what I refer to as the swinging 60s London, the King's Road, and that whole era?
Certainly I was alive and kicking at that time, and, you know, old enough, if you like, to be aware of it. But I was too busy becoming an actress, honestly. I was super dedicated as a young actress. I was very, what's the word?
Cloistered with your...
I was very cloistered with my effort. Focused is a good word, on wanting to become the kind of actress I wanted to become. So I was working at the RSC. I entered into the Royal Shakespeare Company very young, and then spent my first 5 years of my career, which was basically that era.
I was fascinated to be reminded that you worked with Peter Brook on the Conference of the Birds, touring the world. Could you say a little bit about that experience? Because that was a very 60s, what I perceived.
Yes, it was.
70s,
Instead of being up in the King's Road,
very 60s
I chose
aesthetic.
to go with Peter Brook.
Could you tell us a little about that, what it meant to you?
Travel around Africa.
And it was a communal experience, was it not?
Well, all theatre is communal.
Yes,
all
but I mean that you were living together in this kind of tribe.
Yes. Not a tribe. We were mixed race, completely mixed race, mixed culture. We worked in Paris for about 6 months of preparation, and then, I was there for 1 year,
yes,
basically.
Because I remember this crouching on the ground with, you know, indigenous people. And
we travelled through Africa, performing in just, you know, wherever we could, tiny villages, usually to sort of 3 children and a goat, you know. But it was an amazing experience. He was trying to find where theatre is, what the absolute essence, the root of theatre is, when you take away language and you take away cultural habit, if you like.
Did that change your work in any way as a serious young actress of the Royal Shakespeare Company?
I think it was a phase I needed to go through, and I went through it and I came out the other side. Because in the end, I didn't want to spend my life in that sort of deep ensemble kind of thing.
All right.
So you had the sort of the technical training coming through the RSC, and then you went with Peter Brook, where you kind of threw all that aside.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly right.
And then came out the other side.
Exactly right. And then came out the other side, yeah.
No, well, because we know many who did not.
It's an experience that I would not have missed for anything. I'm proud of the fact I had the balls to do it when I was that age. And it was my agent and everybody was looking at me like I was mad, because my career was taking off, you know, and I was in my mid-20s. I was at the perfect time for, you know, to be sort of sold, if you like, as an actress. I was being asked to do television and film and everything, but I just wanted to find out more about what it was that I was doing and about theatre in general. It was an incredible experience. Incredible.
Was he a taskmaster, Peter? Or was he?
Of course, in a way. I mean, he is the great 20th century genius of theatre,
yes.
I believe.
Yes.
So, you know, if you're working with someone, and what we were doing was very difficult, you know, it was incredibly challenging. You had nothing to fall back on. You couldn't fall back on any of the things that were familiar to you. And it was completely improvisational. So, and the sense of failure was enormous when you failed, which you did most of the time. So,
did he let you know it if you'd failed?
Oh, yes, of course.
Oh, he derided you when you failed?
Yeah.
No, not derided. Never derided.
Good.
No.
But you were aiming to please the
Well,
leader.
no, I mean, that's what we do as actors when you're putting on a play or a show, you know, you rehearse. What is rehearsal? What is rehearsal? It's running through the scene and the director or you saying, I don't think that's working. I think we should try something else. That's what rehearsal is.
But of course, if it's improvisational, then you have another level.
Then you have another level, absolutely, of fear. We were all terrified all of the time, you know, and there wasn't a critic to be seen for probably 3,000 miles.
Is there someone or some experience that you can really look at and say, no, this is what put me on the path to becoming a great actress?
Well, certainly looking, you know, watching Maggie Smith, Geraldine McEwen, in the early days of what became the National Theatre, and as a young student. I mean, I wanted to be an actress actually very early on, but...
As a kid, growing up, you wanted...
Yeah, teens, I would say sort of 13, that sort of age. The penny started dropping that was what I wanted.
Because...
That was what I loved doing.
And you were doing it in school?
I was doing it in school, and then I went to a teacher's training college. I didn't go to a drama school.
You didn't go to drama school?
No, that was a financial thing. I couldn't. There was no money for me to go to drama school, so I had to train as a teacher. But I don't regret that at all, incidentally.
Well, how did you move from your teacher
Well,
training
there was a
into-
wonderful organisation called the Youth Theatre in England, the National Youth Theatre, and they would take kids from economically, you know, more difficult backgrounds. In other words, who couldn't afford to go to drama school,
right,
or any of that stuff.
right.
And they would put on shows in the summertime. So as long as you could sort of find somewhere, somebody's couch to sleep on, you could, and as long as you had to audition and be accepted, you would become a part of the production, and they would put it on. And a lot of quite well-known, very well-known British actors that you might have heard of also came through the
Really?
Youth Theatre.
Your parents were Russian immigrants, correct? But
No, just my father.
just your father, but he was artistically inclined, was he?
Well, he was musically inclined. Yes. I sadly absolutely didn't inherit that wonderful trait from him.
Well, but
he was musically inclined.
You don't think there's a link between your acting ability?
No, honestly, I think if my acting thing comes from anywhere, it comes not from my Russian aristocratic father, but from my London working class mum. And I think if it comes from anywhere, it comes from her.
Well, she was a fun, larger-than-life personality?
Fun, but yes, she was if there was a drama queen in our family, it was my mum. Yes, I'm not a drama queen.
I want to pull it back to the Queen. We only have a few minutes left, but you mentioned something that I found amusing. We're stricken by Queen-itis when we meet her. I've talked to people, and I know you've met her, and even people say, well, you know, I'm a Republican, I'm not going to bow. Suddenly in the presence.
Oh, in the presence,
people
I know they do.
Is this
they
what
fall
happens?
apart, absolutely. You do, and you find yourself saying, you know, these ridiculous phrases coming out of your voice, out of your mouth, going, why am I saying that? I never say that.
And what is it? Because she represents so much of who you're...
Well, first of all, it's the setup. Yeah. You know, you're usually in a line.
Yeah.
You know, or if you're not in a line, you're in a cocktail party, and oh, you know, the Queen's, and that one of the functionaries will come over and say, the Queen will be coming over in a few minutes to say hello. You know, oh, okay, thank you. So it's the setup. You know, now the Queen's coming. When is she coming? Oh, no, sorry, excuse me. Here she comes. You know, and then by the time she arrives, and there it is, and it's the Queen, and she's very twinkly and very lovely. And you just fall apart. I don't know what happens, but it happens to me.
There was a wonderful shot of you on Instagram, now quite a famous shot of you riding the subway by yourself. Were you going to rehearsal or something like that?
Yes, I had a little gap in rehearsal, so I thought I'd pop home and back, yeah.
I'm dying for you to get the Queen to go on the tube with you. Could that ever possibly happen? Or
No, you know that could never happen, Michael.
No,
Why are you even asking? You know that's impossible.
When you finish the run of the Queen, what is... you going back to England? Do you have another plays lined up, or?
No, I don't know what I'm doing actually. I don't know what I'm doing. You know, it'll be enough. I'll want a break, and hopefully I'll have a break. So you know, it's quite a long time. In my world, you know, you don't really know what you're doing, and until you know 2 months before you have to do it. But no, I've no idea.
Are there a couple of roles though you'd like to tackle in the theatre?
I would have loved to have done Madame Ranevska in the Cherry Orchard. I would love to have done that at some point, and maybe...
Still could.
Possible?
It's getting a bit dodgy now, but yeah, I guess it's sort of possible.
How about Martha and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Did you ever have that?
Oh, gosh, what a great role. Do you know what? I think it was done so brilliantly by Elizabeth Taylor, and it's on film. I don't think... I wouldn't want to mess with that one. There was something, wasn't it amazing?
I think that is an excellent point.
With Richard Burton. And also, oh my God, that's hard work, that role. I take it off. I take my hat off to anyone who does that play and that role.
A Long Day's Journey into Night?
Well, you know, I don't think the mother in Long Day's Journey is such a great role, really.
Really? Why?
Well, you know, she's twittering around and all on heroin and everything, and I think she's a bit boring, actually.
Did you see Vanessa Redgrave do it with Brian Dennehy in New York?
No, I can imagine her.
Well, she was twitching around.
Yeah,
she was quite remarkable. I have to ask you, do you are so confident you are having this career, which is going very well. Do you ever have anxiety about, am I going to get another good role? I mean, do you have the actors? Do you have the fears that
it's all going to dry up tomorrow?
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. Mind you, I'm getting to be a point at which an age where the drying up thing is going to happen anyway. But you know, for roles. It's. I feel, you know what, that's okay. Maybe you have to hand it off to the next generation. You have to. It's what happens, you know. And it's my great pleasure and excitement to watch these brilliant young actresses, young or not so young, but you know, some of them young, some of them, these brilliant actresses appear.
But that's an aging issue. And what I'm more looking for is that how do you sort of, you work with yourself each day going, oh my God, I'm Helen Mirren. Is that still going on? You know, not that I understand getting older, but that's a different...
No, that sort of transmogrification, to use Calvin's word, or is it Hobbes? It's Calvin, isn't it?
Calvin, I think.
Calvin is the boy.
Yes.
He's the one who transmogrifies. I feel I've transmogrified into Helen Mirren.
Yes.
Whereas I was Helen Mirren. You know, now I'm like Helen Mirren, and I'm not quite sure who that sort of thing is.
I got the sense from you, just seeing you act over the years and seeing you, I once saw you collecting your bags at the airport, that somehow you have managed to avoid the superstar thing that can happen that disconnects people from real life.
Yes. I mean, I've lived my life the way I want to live my life. Mm-hmm. And I have refused to let anything get in the way of that, if you like. So I like going to the supermarket. I would be miserable if I couldn't go to the supermarket. I'd be miserable if I couldn't travel on the subway. Mm-hmm. So I travel on the subway. And, you know, and people are great. Mm-hmm. And it's fine.
And you draw your bath.
I think people get themselves into a bit of a tizzy about how horrible it's all going to be. Mm-hmm. Mind you, I think it's for people who are on TV shows, because that it is difficult. But even with them, you know, I was thinking, you know what, just go out and be in the world. I always thought if I was like that famous, I'd have a T-shirt made saying, yes, I am, you know, whoever it is, but please leave me alone. And then, or please let me get on with my life. And then when people come up, we just say...
So do you do that?
No, I don't, because I don't need to. But, you know, I'm talking about people who do need to.
We had this wonderful actor, Brian Dennehy, on.
Yeah.
And he made the point to us that, well, he was talking about being on television, but still, he said, they treat you like you're 3 years old.
The car will pick you up. Would you like a meat quesadilla or a vegetarian quesadilla?
And that's very corrupting.
Yes, it is. You have to avoid that.
So how do you avoid that?
By saying I don't want anything. It's all right. I don't need a car.
And you know it will lead you down a bad path.
Well,
or the woman is not in danger, Susan, of becoming some Kim Kardashian-like thing. Please. Helen Mirren, it's always great to have you on Theater Talk. A wonderful performance in the
Susan.
audience.
We're not going to worry about you, Helen.
Don't worry about me.
I have a sense this woman can take care of herself on the subway, at the supermarket.
Yeah.
Helen Mirren in the audience at the Gerald Schoenfeld Theater.
Thank you.
Great performance, wonderful actress, and a delightful person to have on a talk show.
Thank you.
Mrs. Wilson must be very proud.
Oh, no, she's furious. No, she much preferred our life in Oxford as a young don's wife. Doesn't care for the limelight or the cut and thrust of Westminster life. Certainly doesn't care for our new home.
Downing Street?
Living in the office, she calls it.
Oh, do you know, my husband feels the same way about this place. Yes, he absolutely loathes it. We all do, actually.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
What a scoop.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, plus public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.